In 1997, long before any world was warcrafted and any watches were over, Blizzard released a PC game called Diablo. In the years that followed, these games became synonymous with the word looter, and over a quarter of a century later, gamers could purchase the fourth mainline installment in this iconic franchise. Diablo 4's listed launch on the 6th of June could be circumvented, provided gamers were willing to purchase specific editions, and the race to level 100 was over before the official release. As a result, trying to pretend this game launched on the 6th feels more than a little disingenuous. Putting that aside, Diablo 4 had a lot to live up to, and a lot to overcome. Launching simultaneously on the PS4, 5, Xbox One, Series and PC was a good start, as Diablo 3 didn't manage to leave PC until the year after its original launch date. As this title suggests, the game pulls from the Anglo-Christian mythos of demons and angels, with the player taking the role of a wanderer who lives in Sanctuary, a cradle of humanity amid the never-ending war between the forces of heaven and hell. I honestly hadn't given this game's story much thought, but the opening cutscene changed my mind in a very positive way. This was intriguing and well produced, and the sight of the game's antagonist descending from a disturbing triangle of magically extracted human entrails certainly earns this game its PEGI rating. This opening left me with high hopes for the rest of the game, and this was further enforced by the early portion of gameplay. Your character begins the game alone and lost, seeking shelter at a town. The scenes that take place here suggest a world that is harsh and unfair, and the bleak environments you wade through, and the lingering threat of reanimated corpses and demonic creatures, sells this as a place that must be taxing just to exist in. Bubbling under the surface here is the notion of a prophecy. The angel Inarius and his faithful believe they are destined to defeat Lilith, and raise an army to confront her. There is another strong cutscene later in the game as these two forces clash. These moments are delivered in great detail, with a lot of work going into cinematography and graphical presentation. Lilith is rendered incredibly well, and certainly shows a more nuanced form of villainy than Diablo himself has for the previous games. Top marks for effort, and top marks for voice acting. The choices for Lilith, Elias, and the game's narrator, Laura, fit perfectly with their characters, and this really helps emphasize the better moments in the game.
Then at least have the decency to join me for supper. I'm bloody hungry.
The underlying issue is that the overall quality of the story doesn't rise and fall, it's just a steady decline after the opening. Rather than returning to some competent average, the interesting story elements always conclude with the same recurring twist: people dying. This stops feeling impactful earlier than it should. The introduction of the wolf character could have given this game the spark it needed, but instead, it just leaves another plot thread to dangle unnecessarily, without getting any closure. I was driven to finish the story, but when it ended with a lot left unanswered, likely baiting a conclusion in the DLC, I had seen enough and wanted out. Where the story starts to show flaws and weakness, the gameplay loop remains solid. You control your avatar from a slightly angled top-down view and use abilities and skills to defeat enemies, complete quests and dungeons. In short, Diablo is a looter RPG, with the strongest singular driving force in the game being the search for loot. This drops consistently from the enemies that you kill, and you use gear, gems, enchantments, and blacksmith upgrades, along with crafted elixirs, to make yourself more powerful. This overall progression is handled well. You level up and spend skill points, and there are a good number of these that fundamentally alter how a skill behaves. Right now, there are 5 classes to choose from: the Barbarian, Necromancer, Sorcerer, Druid, and Rogue. I did feel that this was a fairly limited selection, and would have preferred more choice. However, outside of a dedicated support class, there's no major archetype holes in the current roster. I can forgive these skill trees for feeling a little condensed, like someone rounded off the edges, because there's a plethora of aspects and unique effects that can be attributed to gear, and striking the balance between the ones of these that are skills and the ones that these are loot is a tough ask. Blizzard couldn't give you too many amazing abilities in your skills, or they'd devalue what you had on legendary gear. In this regard, the balance between skills and gear is perfect, because neither of them overshadow the other. Like many games close to launch, the classes need some balancing, but the underlying design intentions are very strong. By the time you reach the end of the campaign, you'll have a pretty good idea of what you want your character to do. One of the best elements of this type of game is that you'll sometimes get a piece of loot that buffs an ability you don't use, and it makes you want to try that skill out. That happened once or twice here, and that certainly helps lift my opinion of this game. Other forms of progression include leveling up the world tier, which provides further rewards for killing enemies in return for making the enemies harder. The main one of these, increased experience, is likely the most attractive incentive for pushing up into the higher tiers. I have mixed feelings about the way that these are gated off though, as the enemies in the overworld sync to your level. I feel you should have been able to select either Nightmare or Torment straight away after the story, rather than having to clear level gated dungeons first. These dungeons should be level synced so you can unlock Nightmare or Torment whenever you want. Loot is primarily the draw of the Diablo games, and there are different colour-coded tiers for you to work your way through. This follows a pattern of white, blue, yellow, and then orange for legendary loot. Loot also has new named values, such as Sacred or Ancestral, which indicates the relative strength of an item, with Ancestral legendaries being some of the most powerful pieces in-game. There are also unique items, which are pinkish in colour and have powerful effects. This loot tiering is fine, and works in a way that helps you climb up the power ladder. The green set pieces that I recall from Diablo 3 feel like a strange omission, but I do guess Blizzard want to hold something back for the future, or for seasonal play. I want to touch on gameplay briefly here before I dive into the endgame, and really it's only to say that this gameplay feels dated, but not necessarily bad. I downloaded Diablo 3 again, to see if I was recalling this incorrectly, and despite there being over a decade between these two releases, moving and playing this game doesn't feel markedly different to playing that game. I can see progress in the graphics and the options menus, but the cursor movement, the skill interaction, and some of the rubber banding really do feel like decade-old problems. This isn't necessarily bad, and the connection issues were fairly minor in the grand scheme of things, but the controls didn't feel particularly responsive, and I always felt like my vision was being artificially restricted, even when I'm fully zoomed out. I'd have really liked the ability to zoom out even further than the default camera position. I will say that there have been some good quality of life features here, such as the mounts to get around the map, the fast travel waypoints, and useful NPCs in almost every town or village. But there are some bigger missions here, most notably, no overlay map. I do think the game could also use more configurable auto loot, because I'm sick of accidentally leaving gems on the floor because they have white text like gold. These should have just been vacuumed up into your inventory when you walk over them. Inventory itself is another issue. I understand there's a finite amount of bag space, but this does feel very restrictive for the rate you get gear and items at. You very quickly end up just ignoring gear that isn't yellow or rarer, and that's during the campaign. I didn't make it far into my first Nightmare dungeon before ignoring everything that didn't have a sacred suffix. The endgame in this type of product is where the primary time sink is supposed to be. This was certainly my experience with Diablo 2 and 3. For what it's worth, there's something not right about this endgame, and I could tell this because I found it really difficult to convince myself to push past level 54. It took so much effort and repetition to get from 50 to 60 that I have no desire to get through 40 more levels at this pace before I could start getting the best gear for my character. This felt arduous and mundane. Normally entering the endgame comes with a very clear progression path, but Diablo 4's seems to just be go back out there and do more of the same. I get it, looter style games have a grind, but this one just felt bad. The reason I know this is because I was closing in on level 60 and I had lost any desire I had to roll another character and was actively checking my Steam wishlist to see if anything I wanted was on sale. Rolling a new character is a massive part about how I played MMOs like Blizzard's own World of Warcraft or even Diablo 3. I'd get bored of one character and want to try the abilities of another. It would keep me going despite having to do the same activities. Here, the thought of having to play the story again so soon after finishing it, or just start this monotonous endgame grind from level 1, wasn't an appealing thought. Even the supposedly dedicated endgame activities, like PvP, world bosses, hell tides, nightmare dungeons, they're all a little bland. I like the idea of nightmare dungeons, which work like Diablo 3's rifts, but these feel like they send you to the same dungeons over and over again, and it gets really old really quickly, even with the new modifiers. The Hell Tides look good on paper. They ask you to kill enemies in an area of the map and collect dropped items. You can then use these to open chests for specific gear. But you struggle against other players trying to farm the same areas, or struggle to find efficient routes or collections of enemies to focus on. This also lacks a clear goal compared to the dungeons, which have finish criteria. Helltides have less focus, and you have to drive your own agenda to progress using them. Graphically, this game is significantly better than Diablo 3, and while the character creator doesn't have too many customization options, it possesses an adequate amount. The best looking parts of this game are the environmental textures, like the glazed look on a stone wall as water drips down it, and as the light reflects off it into the distance. That or the sand and snow beneath your feet as you crunch along. The character models, from players to NPCs and enemies, feel adequate, like PS4, Xbox One era models, and while I was worried about how legendary loot would look, alongside abhorrently expensive microtransactions, there is some variation to be found for free. Comparing Diablo 4's character creator against one of the better creators from the MMO genre shows that while Diablo's graphics are solid, they aren't overly impressive, but what Blizzard's looter has going for it is that character diversity is a strong positive. While I'm cherry-picking a poor example of this, I think it helps illustrate just how much it means to have a character creator where you can build something that feels real and class-appropriate, rather than something that's a sexualized ideal. The bleak and atmospheric world of Sanctuary bleeds through every pore of this game. There's an abundance of greys and browns, and a dark, murky colouring that just fits really well. But it likely contributes towards the feeling of repetition in some of the tile sets and randomly generated environments. As much as I don't like praising Diablo 3 too much, at least the High Heavens biome had a different feel to it, with more light and warmth in the colours and the environment. This game was missing something in that vein, that's a clear contrast from the shadowy murk that lingers around every corner here. One final positive I have though is that technically speaking, this game does run pretty well, and has a decent number of accessibility options. The only technical negative is that this game is an always online world. This meant that Blizzard needed some form of long-term monetization to maintain their servers, such as cosmetics for sale, which are priced in a way that feels offensively high. I don't like it at all, but I'll ignore it as long as these don't become gameplay affecting. At the moment, Diablo 4 is lacking, but not in the areas I thought it would be. Rather, it's lacking in what should be its bread and butter, the gameplay loop and the ability to get me hooked on the treadmill of kill, loot, repeat. For reasons I perhaps don't yet understand, this game failed to achieve that. I never felt like I lacked power, just my journey forward was so tedious, to the point where I felt expending time and effort to progress it didn't feel worth it. I'm sure this can be resolved by steering even further into the MMO model, and creating a daily dungeon system that gives bonus XP or loot, maybe creating a dungeon finder with a matchmaking system, or at least something that refreshes on a regular basis to keep me coming back each day or each week. Other looters and MMOs do these things already, so there are examples out there for Blizzard to take inspiration from. This game couldn't persuade me to spend a weekend, or even a few hours after work, trying to keep grinding, at least not in its current state. I hope that the elements where I believe Diablo 4 is lacking are resolved with the introduction of seasonal play or patches and fixtures, even if it comes in the DLC, but I'm struggling to see much value beyond what I've already got from the story. I would love for this review to be the one I write and record that ages the worst, and that anyone watching this in late 2023 can't fathom where these criticisms come from. Whether or not that will come true is something that only time will tell.